This is Wayne Viener, and this is a Capital Sports Blog production tonight. Along with me, I have Freddy Callens from Boca. We've got Todd Carton inside the Beltway. We're going to start off tonight talking about DJ Durkin. I was at the press conference. I know a lot of you have taken the time to take a look at the press conference. I saw a very young, slightly nervous guy who started off and took a couple minutes to get into it, and suddenly his confidence, his success started to come through. He's a very genuine guy, and I can certainly see why people like him and why he was the National Recruiter of the Year a few years ago for Florida. Todd, what do you know about his background?
Well, obviously, people were thinking about wanting to get Dino Babbers from Bowling Green. Well, we got a Bowling Green guy because that's where Durkin played his college ball. And he's done assistant coaching stints at Stanford, Florida, which is the Urban Meyer connection, and, of course, most recently as D coordinator up at Michigan, where he has this connection with one of the Harbaugh brothers. I forget, John, Jim, they're interchangeable to me.
Freddie, there's a lot of talk about other guys who could have been the coach at Maryland. What's your take on that situation?
I think, well, let's start with Mike Locksley, the interim head coach, former head coach in New Mexico, and obviously the key to the recruiting class of 2016, which primarily is Haskins, the 4- or 5-star rated quarterback. Locksley was offered a significant raise to stay at Maryland, and right now he has opted out to pursue perhaps other opportunities. I don't think this means he's going, but he's probably gone. Many will now lament that now we're going to lose this great recruiting class. Let's be real. Out of the top 20 kids in the area, Maryland had 4 commitments. Not like we're locking down the area. As far as the kids that are so excited about, the DMV movement, we see that's what I always thought it was a lot more talk than reality. When kids go to a school, it's either they have a dream to go to a school, and Maryland's not the kind of school where little kids grow up saying, "I want to play football for Maryland. I want to run on Bird Stadium." That usually is for schools like USC or Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, the schools with great, rich Notre Dame, great tradition, great history. Most cases, the kids, they come to school because there's a connection between not the head coach usually, but their recruiting coach. And Locksley, the main recruiter, particularly in the area, kids. That's what the tie-in to these kids in Maryland. It's not they want to once in a while the kid want to stay at home, but they like Locksley. That's why they hung around. That's why you didn't see a mass exodus when Edsel left. I don't think anybody on the team really. They were happy he left. Differently when Edsel came on board and everybody took off, either before or after the first season.
A lot of that's true, Freddie. From what the folks on Rivals and folks on Scout have written, it seems like many of these recruits are going to stay to Maryland, at least until Durkin gets a shot to pitch his version of the Maryland program and show the staff that he's going to put together. Todd, have you seen any recent news about Haskins? Because he seems to be the wild card in this.
Well, what I've seen is some things about some changes to his Twitter account, and that he's now repinned a tweet that says #GoMaryland or something along those lines. If Haskins wants to explore options, 18-year-old kids change their mind about things. This situation is very different from the one he committed to. Hopefully that he will be open to having Durkin come in, talk to the guy, and Dwayne will listen to him, and maybe he'll stick around. There has been some rumors about LSU, and there are a lot of guys from LSU that are now following his Twitter. Whether that's an indication of anything or not, your guess is as good as mine.
I think a lot has to do with if they bring in. I think it's Durkin's personality and how he can relate to Haskins, and how Haskins likes him initially, and then who they bring in for the offensive coordinator or a quarterback coach. And then Haskins has to decide, well, I wanted to go to Maryland. I like Locksley. But wow, maybe this new coach, he seems really, really good, and I really, really like the philosophy of the offensive coordinator or the new quarterback coach. And I feel that I can maximize my abilities here because, as most kids, particularly a kid with this highly rated, yeah, he certainly has in the back of his mind, I'm sure, I'm going to play at the next level after college.
And he should be looking to do that. And I think that this staff, as it's been rumored to be put together, most of the coaches are 40 years or younger. They're coming from the top programs with winning records. I saw the possibilities of getting defensive guys from South Carolina, from Tennessee, offensive coordinators from Ohio State, that TJ Durkin is going to bring guys that he's worked with before at top-level programs, and most of them are the size, the style of being able to compete in the Big Ten. We're not talking about a lot of ex-Maryland guys, which sort of bothers me a little bit. I love it when we have Terps on staff. But if we're going to be in the Big Ten, we just brought in a guy that talks about growing up in Ohio, talks about blue-collar football, has quotes like, you find a way to get to the top, and that you don't talk about it, you just be it, about being a tough football player. It's certainly a different look and feel than when Edsel came in, and far different from when we were in the ACC. Todd, have you heard anything about the coordinators that might come in?
Nothing specifically as of yet. Just sort of the general trend that you've heard, that he is looking for young, energetic guys, and you quoted him. One of the things he said also in the press conference was, there's going to be a lot of energy in this building, and if he's any representation of that, there's going to be a lot of energy around Maryland's program. But I will say, with respect to Haskins, I do want to add that, over the long term, big picture, the coach is going to be more important than the recruit, ultimately. And so, we have to buy into the vision that Durkin is going to bring to Maryland, and hopefully he can sell that to immediate recruits and keep these guys, and that will accelerate his ability to build the program. But over the long term, it's got to be his program.
I read a story in the Detroit Press about Durkin, and it emphasized his incredible energy. His dad is a long-distance runner. He would go play football, and then after the football game, put on his shoes and run 15 miles with his dad. It's everything to him it's fast-paced, it's energy, which is almost like 180 degrees. You think about Edsel. I never saw Edsel. I mean, well, he moved like a terrapin.
Yes, he did. Close to you, Freddie, Miami hires Mark Richt. What do the newspapers think about that?
They're thrilled with it. I mean, Mark Richt is a former quarterback for the Canes. Had a tremendous career, 15 years at Georgia. I guess 9-3 wasn't good enough. Richt, very comfortable here. I was at home in Boca Raton. Very, very happy coming here. He wanted to be more involved in the offense and with quarterback play at Georgia. Before they decided they'd go another route, and they picked up Smart from Alabama, who's the #1 defensive coordinator for Saban. But Rick now will be much more involved with Miami's offense and the quarterback, and they have a great quarterback. This kid Kalo is one of the top quarterbacks in the country. It's a guy, when he came, we had a connection with, what's Damon's last name?
Evans.
Right, Damon Evans had a relationship with Rick, a very good friendship with him when Evans was the AD at Georgia. And when I heard he was supposed to come to Maryland to interview, I thought, well, maybe we got a shot because of that relationship, but we certainly didn't have. We had a quality quarterback coming in. Rick was hooked up with one of the top quarterbacks in California who committed to Georgia. It's funny because last night going to the gym, I'm hearing on one of the national radio sports shows that Rick was probably going to sit out the year, but if he did coach, he was going to UVA. So when you listen to read all the stuff on the internet and all these guys, national guys hooked up, nobody really knows anything. But Rick certainly, I mean, when I heard the first thing he said was asked about the openings, well, nobody's emailed me or called me yet. And he's probably very, very honest about that, but I'm sure the emails and the tweets and the phone calls and faxes and courier pigeons and smoke signals all went up, and he's a natural fit for Miami. And they were looking for Mario Cristobal, former player there, former FIU coach who's an assistant at Alabama. Greg Schiano, a former coach here that had some success early at Rutgers. They had Mullen came in, and Dan Mullen interviewed for Mississippi State. They had a nice core of coaches coming in for as potential new coaches, but they did the best with Rick, in my mind, no question.
It's time to do our reset. This is a Capital Sports Blog production. I'm Wayne Viener. That was Freddy from Boca. Todd Carton's along for the ride tonight. Todd, during the end of the DJ Durkin introductory press conference, somebody asked him if being a head coach for one game at Florida, when they let Will Muschamp go, how that affected him. And he said, without a doubt, 100%, being a head coach for that Florida bowl game changed his perspective and led him to be here today. Do you think Maryland should have any concern about hiring a guy as the head coach who's only had that one game as a head coach in his college career?
Well, in 1999, leading into the 2000 football season, Maryland hired a guy who had no games as a head coach. His name was Ralph Friedgen, and he had a reasonable period of success at Maryland. So whoever you hire, I think it's always a roll of the dice, even with a guy like Mark Richt. We don't know whether his philosophy would have translated to Maryland. Clearly, if Maryland had been able to hire Mark Richt and he had that kind of success, if he's 9-3 at Maryland for 15 years, they're naming buildings after the guy and erecting statues to him of him. So I don't think Maryland needs to be concerned, and that seems to be the natural path. You go from coordinator to head coach. Now, might he have been better going to a smaller P5 school or the group of 5 schools? Who knows? But no, I'm not all that worried.
I think the key concern that you mentioned who Miami interviewed. Are there any concerns on your part that in the end Maryland was looking at Frank Reich, DJ Durkin, and Mike Loxley? Do you think that
I
should have been higher?
I do have let me just backtrack on something that Todd was saying about when Ralph came in. I think a great deal of Ralph's success early, which is 31. I think with 31-8 his first 3 years. I think his last 7 years he was actually under 500 in conference play. But his early success, I think, has to do a great deal with Ralph's ability to recruit 2 tremendous coordinators in Charlie Taffy and Gary Blackney. And that's will be a key for Durkin to bring in the best he can as far as defensive coordinators, because those guys, they have a tremendous impact, obviously, on the program. With Randy Edsel, he brought in we had Randy Crowden come in from LSU, which he wanted to run the spread, and we had Danny O'Brien. It was just ridiculous thinking there, and I think one of the problems
was his defensive coordinator, because Don Brown left 3 weeks after Edsel walked into the building.
One of the big problems that Randy had, among many problems with Randy, was I think the coaching staff he brought in were just pretty much on his level, which was not top level talent.
And that's one of the positives that I see with this staff is he's going after guys who are winners at big programs. I agree. Randy went after what was left of the Big East. He brought in a lot of guys from a Connecticut team that that was his calling card, but the ceiling wasn't high enough for that staff. I really think that DJ is going to bring in a lot of guys who have that competitive fire, that speed, that passion for winning right now. That's going to make Maryland better. Might not be better next year, but it's going to be better in the long haul. As we wrap this up, go to Todd. Any final comments on bringing DJ Durkin into Maryland?
Well, obviously, I hadn't had a lot of exposure to DJ prior to the press conference today. I think after his press conference today and the way he handled himself and the answers he gave and the energy that he displayed, I'm all in on seeing where he wants to take this program. I think that he can turn things around. I do believe that there's a little bit of a core of talent. I think the effort that they got from the last 6 games with Loxley as coach shows that there's a certain core of talent. I think with great coaching and a somewhat softer schedule next year, that he might have some early success. And if he has early success, then it becomes easier to build a better program more quickly.
Freddie?
I think he's a good hire. You had asked a question before, and as you know, Wayne, I like to be a little controversial, a little edgy, with something to talk about that people don't talk about much. Why we didn't bring in, why the stable of candidates wasn't that quote unquote impressive when you think about a Big Ten job, a school that may have gone $4 million. I mean, they're talking they would spend the money to bring in a top coach, a big splash. And I have to go back to our athletic director, who I feel does not have a great reputation throughout college football, and maybe athletics in general. And that's Mr. Anderson, who I believe seems like to be like one of the nicest gentlemen you could possibly meet. But he just seems to make gaffe after gaffe in the media, which put Maryland in a bad light. Let's start off with Ralph Friedgen's coming back to coach. The next day, Ralph is fired. James Franklin, the heir apparent to Ralph, now he's not even offered the job. He's gone to Vanderbilt. Then we have, on the basketball front, he's going out to Las Vegas to talk to Sean Miller. He returns saying he never met Sean Miller in Las Vegas, and yet Miller says they met and has come to an agreement. And that was just a bizarre story in itself. And then you wrap it up with the leak that Randy Edsall is going to be fired after the Ohio State game. It breaks, once it's into the internet, it's a virus. It travels everywhere. And for 8 hours, Randy Edsall was hanging in the wind till Anderson made the phone call to him to talk to him, which is, to me, if that's I read that in Sports Illustrated and other places. There's not just like from a local blog somewhere, but the combination of all those gaffes. I forgot Mike Leach. Every Maryland fan thought, here's our new coach. Next day, Randy Edsall. Almost 180-degree difference in personality and style and success in his career. Leach had a great 10 years at Texas Tech. Edsall's coming from Connecticut with moderate success the last couple of years in a very weak conference. So all these gaffes, the coaching fraternity and football fraternity and athletic department fraternities throughout the country, there's a lot of talk, I'm sure, between everyone, and I think that hurt Maryland a great deal. I don't know of a lot of guys who really wanted to come here and work under that's their boss. I don't think you want to work for a guy like that. That's one theory.
Well, Maryland has not particularly been able to bring in those big names on the football side. Of course, known as a basketball school. But there are other football factors.
They're building a $155 million facility. They have the backing not only of Under Armour, the brand name, they have the backing of the owner of Under Armour. And that's like akin to having the guy Phil Knight from Nike backing Oregon. It's just not a relationship like a lot of schools have with these manufacturers. This is a personal thing with Under Armour in Maryland.
It is, but Maryland's still not looked at as a football school. I know they're spending the money, and I always go through this where I call them we, because I'm a lifelong Terp. As much as I hate to say it, not really looked at as a football school. We're trying to make the difference. We're trying to spend the money, but we're not the only football school, even if you count us in that as a Power 5 that's having trouble figuring out who the coach is going to be. South Carolina, the job's still open. Missouri, the job's still open. I don't know what's going on in Virginia, but we're not the only group that might have looked at other choices. But with all that being said, after meeting DJ Durkin and hearing about the plans he has, I'm sort of happy at the moment. I like
the choice too. I think the guy has the energy. He's been around some great coaches. Shaw's a great coach. Harbaugh's a great coach. Urban Meyer's a great coach. So he's been mentored by the top core guys in football. and he's familiar with the Big Ten. He's recruited in Florida. He's been out in California, so he's got connections all over the country. And for Maryland to really step up, they're going to not only have to really lock down this area and start getting more top players than Penn State's going to pick up this year, but you're going to have to recruit in the South, because the South is where the athletes are. And you have to recruit the big guys from the Midwest, and in California you have the great athletes. So they have to recruit nationally if they want to be a national recognized program.
And I'm going to give the last word tonight to Todd Carton.
Well, leave it to Freddy to throw out the most controversial part of this discussion to the very end. I got to give you kudos to that, Freddy, because boy, we could have gone toe to toe on that for 15 minutes. But I too.
Stay tuned for the next podcast. That'll come in the next podcast.
All right. But I have to come down with both you and Wayne in saying that I really have walked away with a very positive impression of DJ Durkin. The guy looked absolutely giddy at the prospect of being, I don't know if it was just being a head coach or being Maryland's head coach, but I don't think the smile ever left his face. And he just communicated an energy and an excitement that if he can communicate that to the players and bring in top assistants, as you said, I think Maryland football could turn the corner.
And with that, that's going to end our podcast for this evening. I'm Wayne Viener. That was Todd Carton, Freddy from Boca. I love talking to you guys about Maryland football, and we'll do it again soon. Go Terps. We'll see you next time.